We're joined now by Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor, Mr. Khaled Dawoud. Mr. Dawoud, welcome to Q News. Sir, now, what are the main unresolved issues in implementing the Gaza agreement, and what are the potential obstacles that could still derail the ceasefire negotiations in Qatar?
Well, thanks, Hani, for having me. Again, the situation seemed to not have moved much since yesterday, and all the positive statements that are being made by current U.S. administration Biden officials, as well as those assisting the incoming U.S. President Donald Trump on the issues of the Israeli hostages that are being held. Everybody's making positive statements, including, of course, the Qataris, where the talks among Israel, the Palestinians, and the Qataris and the Americans and the Egyptians, of course, are being held. Again, everybody's saying agreement is very, very close. The Qatari foreign ministry just an hour ago, they announced that they're only working on final details, but as we always say, the devil is in the details. Again, every point of dispute over the past 8 months since this proposal was originally made by U.S. President Joe Biden could be a reason for the collapse of this agreement. But so far, according to the sources that are leaking information to Israeli and Arab media, the issue of Hamas demand that any agreement should lead to a final ceasefire and not just a temporary ceasefire is an issue of contention. What's the language that's going to be used in the shift from the first transitional stage to the second stage, whether it's going to be a total ceasefire, an end of hostilities. That's something that the Israeli government is very cautious not to guarantee to the Palestinian side, insisting that they are going to have the capability of re-entering Gaza in case they believe that some parts of the agreements are being violated. But again, it seems the key pressure is coming from the incoming U.S. President Joe Biden. The reports in the Israeli media stated that Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, gave sort of no option agreement for the Israeli side, saying that they have to sign it, that Trump wants the agreement before he gets into office on Monday, on January 20. And that's why people or parties involved are speaking about the possibility of reaching the agreement before the end of the week. There were even reports that the agreement would be announced today or even Thursday. But again, the issues remain to be very critical. The number of prisoners, Palestinian prisoners to be released in return for each Israeli soldier, the degree of the withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the sticking border point of Rafah, from the Netzarim corridor in the middle, and allowing the Palestinian displaced people to return to their homes in the north and elsewhere. All these are issues that obviously require detailed negotiations, although supposedly these parties have been already speaking about those issues for more than 8 months so far.
Well, Mr. Dawoud, speaking about the negotiations, what can you tell us about the nature and the mechanism of the cooperation between Egypt, Qatar and the US and their coordinated efforts to ensure a ceasefire?
Well, according to the reports, this guarantee of this agreement, if it is to be reached by the end of this week, today, tomorrow, Thursday, is going to be guaranteed by the United States, by the Egyptians, by the Qataris, because as we know, the level of trust between Hamas and Israel is like below zero. So, I mean, again, Hamas does not believe that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is sincere about reaching a final ceasefire, a full ceasefire, and that he only wants the release of the initial group of Israeli hostages, 33 people alive, and then maybe he would resume the war again like he did at the end of November 2023. So they are seeking those kinds of guarantees from the Americans, from the Egyptians, from the Qataris, that the humanitarian aid is going to be allowed on the first day of implementation of a ceasefire, 600 trucks a day, including 60 trucks with fuel, very much needed for hospitals, for bakeries. Again, it's a very detailed agreement, which makes it very difficult. How many people will be released after like 3 days, after 7 days, negotiations towards the second stage. So it's a lengthy process. that's probably always going to be open for exchange of accusations of violations. However, that's where the United States, Egypt, and Qatar come in to convince both parties to maintain this agreement and to reach as well an agreement on who is going to rule Gaza in case the ceasefire holds.
Well, how do you assess the criticism by Itamar Ben-Gvir regarding the Gaza deal, and could it lead to the collapse of Netanyahu's coalition, do you think?
I personally believe that this is kind of, statements that are being made by Gafir by the Smotrich for domestic purposes. I mean, these extremist members of the government, such as Ben Gvir and Smotrich, they know more than anyone else that if they decide to pull out from this government or lead to the collapse of this government, they almost 100% not going to get a chance to get into the government again. So probably they're trying to satisfy their domestic audience. Reports coming out from Israel has been noting that already Netanyahu has a majority of ministers within the cabinet to approve this agreement. Ben Gvir and Smotrich, they have only 6 ministers who might oppose this agreement, while there are 27 who are likely to approve it. And even in parliament, if this agreement goes to the Israeli parliament, the Israeli opposition, led by Mr. Lapid or Benny Gantz, have publicly stated they would support the agreement because they believe everybody needs a ceasefire right now. This war has caused tremendous humanitarian losses on the Palestinian side, more than 46,000 martyrs who died, plus probably 10,000, at least 10,000 who remain under the rubble. The suffering of the Palestinians is humongous. I mean, just you cannot even describe it in words. The hospitals are being destroyed, the schools are being destroyed, and from the Israeli side, the losses have been heavy as well, only over the past week. And despite all the claims of successful operations against Hamas, Israeli soldiers have been falling in big numbers. Reservists do not want to continue fighting in Gaza. The hostage families are putting a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. So probably those are among the factors that are actually leading to expectations that agreement might be needed.
Mr. Dawoud, what impact do you think the US President-elect Donald Trump's involvement has on the negotiations?
Well, again, according to most of the parties involved in these negotiations, the presence of Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his shuttle kind of flights between Tel Aviv and Doha has obviously been very influential and critical in pushing towards this agreement. As you know, of course, and your audience know, Trump has a very busy agenda, and probably he's even stated that considering all the complications and circumstances, the Israeli-Gaza, the Israeli-Palestinian deal might be the easiest compared to effort to end the war in Ukraine, for example, as well as his own domestic agenda. This is a man who's coming in with a plan to deport hundreds of thousands of refugees on the first day, getting ready for fights with China, with Canada, with Mexico. So probably he doesn't want the continuous headache from his point of view of this ongoing war, and that's why many people credit the incoming U.S. president for possibility of reaching a ceasefire. While, I mean, again, would remain serious concerns that Netanyahu, knowing his negotiation style, will continue to press for so-called something in return for agreeing to a ceasefire. Everybody is waiting to know what's this something in return that Trump might be offering, hopefully not in terms of expanding Israeli settlements or recognizing the Israeli occupation of parts of the West Bank. So, I mean, let's wait and see. On one hand, it's good that Trump is putting pressure to reach an agreement. But again, let's remain cautious about what price Netanyahu is going to ask Trump for.
Yes. That was Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor, Mr. Khaled Dawoud. Mr. Dawoud, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News.